All right, welcome back to We Talk Tech, everybody. Today we got an episode about transportation and transit.
I'm really excited to introduce Nicole, our community advisor, and she is a frequent user of public transit. Please tell me a bit about yourself.
Hi, it's great to be here. I am the new community advisor for Technology for a Living. I work in the peer program, sort of expanding it. We're doing really great things. And yeah, I'm excited to be here talking about transit today.
All right, and Nicole, thanks for joining us. And being part of the peer group is discussing topics with other peers, like transit, like many other topics. But in terms of transit, what do you mostly use to get around the city?
I use transit every day. So for me, largely right now, the bus and the Skytrain is primarily what I use to get around Vancouver. For people who either don't have access to a vehicle or don't drive, having access to transit is a really accessible and affordable way to be able to get from A to B and be more independent.
And I know that when the fare gates came in, so we're going to talk about the SkyTrain. When the fare gates came in, there were issues around the cards and people with a disability tapping the cards at the fare gates to be able to get in and out. Do you know if they've sorted that out and how do you access the gates?
I can tap the card, so I don't need that extra tap free accessibility feature that they now have available. But yeah, beforehand, I knew there was tons of problems with people not being able to get through the gates. You'd have to wait or call a number to get help, and who knows how long you'd be waiting there. So to have this tap-free option, I think makes it a lot easier for people to be able to access the SkyTrain.
Hey, Nicole, I'm curious. How is your access to public transit changed from where you live now compared to in Cloverdale?
So I grew up in the Fraser Valley. I grew up in Surrey slash Cloverdale area. And I really relied either on my parents or other people to drive me around or Handy Dart, which is completely unreliable. In those areas, the buses are few and far between. It's not like a lot of the Vancouver area where buses come every 5 to 10 minutes. It's basically every half hour. When I was there, I mean, I know there's been improvements now, but it's really tough. And also, some of the stops over there aren't accessible. So they can't even get ramps down when you go to your stop. It was really frustrating. So once I moved to the kids area where I was near buses that would come so frequently, it made a huge difference in how I got around. I was able to be more social, be more involved in everyday activities. It just made a huge difference in my life.
Okay, Nicole, you mentioned you've ridden a bus, you've ridden the SkyTrain. Obviously, you use SkyTrain a lot.
Yeah,
Now, for me, I would think, okay, SkyTrain's going to get me across the city a lot faster
right.
than a bus would. But what's easier to use? Is it the SkyTrain with the elevators and the gaps? I understand there's gaps between the SkyTrain and the platform. Or is it a bus in Vancouver that comes more often and has a decent ramp on it?
Oh gosh, it depends because yes, there's been massive improvements, and yes, it's an amazing system for people people with disabilities, but there's little things that could always be changed. So, for example, on a bus, I find the biggest issues are um, not having enough spaces for people in wheelchairs on one bus. There's room for two wheelchairs on every bus, and a lot of times you're contending with the public, you're contending with crowding, you're contending with strollers, that have to sit in wheelchair seats. Fortunately, there's still not enough space to meet the demand in Vancouver for the mobility impaired, you know, population. With the Skytrain, there is the elevator. There is getting through the gate, the elevator, which a lot of, especially the older stations, they're really high. The buttons are high. They're pretty high still, and they're for people who have dexterity issues or they can't use their their arms in that way. It's really hard to push buttons. I don't even know how people would do it themselves. You would definitely have to figure something else out or bring somebody with you, which isn't really independence for some people, like so there is that to contend with. There's also the on the older trains, there's not a lot of room for chairs. There's not as many spots for chairs, whereas like the newer Canada line, they've definitely made changes to where they put the wheelchair spots, and there's a lot more room to get around, so you're kind of you know so I think the Skytrain is still the easier bet because once you get on and you're there and it's a lot easier in that way. But again, I'm coming from a place where I was really limited to not getting around at all, so for me to have options is just it's awesome.
So Nicole, it seems like most of the time it runs pretty smooth.
Yeah.
Are there any tips you can give the viewers on making, transit a little more efficient for yourself?
Say if you've never done transit before, like, or you want to get used to it, just like do a dry run or something, or go, see how accessible it is. If you have time, because sometimes you don't realize until you get there. Oh, somebody else's idea of accessibility isn't your idea of accessibility.
I know I've relied on Good Samaritans to help me over the years at different stations to push buttons on elevators and to pull out my pass card and such. So thank you to everybody who's helped me all over the world. I really appreciate it. And getting back to planning, something that I know I use in other towns is like Google Maps and Google Street View, so I can see a virtual tour of the station, looking for where the elevators are, where the ramps are, curb cuts, etc. So that's pretty helpful.
I do that too because I'm visual, so I like to see what I'm dealing with, right? Like not just
Yes.
a map of it. I like to actually see it. So that's why I use Google a lot, because it allows me to see exactly where I'm going to be.
And I love how you can see how full the bus is ahead of time, so you can look in advance in let's say Next Ride or Google Maps and see if it's going to be a full bus. Maybe wait for one that's less crowded.
Okay, and Ian, I just want to take it back a little bit. Just rewind for a second. You mentioned traveling the world. Um, in your travels, have you seen places that have done transit really well, and maybe some obstacles in other countries, and perhaps even tips on planning your trip, and before you leave to use the transit systems?
Some highlights are definitely Tokyo, Japan. I already mentioned that, but unbelievable. I've never been anywhere where they take accessibility and inclusion so serious and with so much respect. Absolutely incredible. Other places in Amsterdam and Netherlands is quite good. Even places I was quite surprised about, such as Thailand in Bangkok. That was fantastic. I initially relied upon private van services, and then at the very end of my trip, I thought, why not try going to the mall? And it was such a wonderful experience. So. There are other places, obviously, they're not quite as developed, smaller towns and villages where transportation It's very different. Parts of Cambodia, for example, where you really have to find something in advance. For example, a wheelchair accessible tut-tut, or build a ramp, which is what we did, and rent a regular van. But it's all about being prepared. With public transit specifically, I'd say the most important thing is to do your research, contact them in advance, ask a lot of questions, provide the dimensions and the weight of your wheelchair, because that can be a bit of a hiccup where they're just not used to having large power wheelchairs. And for the most part, I think you'll have a very pleasant experience if you plan ahead.
Ian, you wanted to touch on a couple apps you use.
Yeah, so I have a van. I don't drive, but I still like to be as independent as possible. And something that is really cool is a module that I purchased for my vehicle, and it's not cheap, but I love technology, and so it's just another accessory, and it's drone mobile, and it allows me through my phone or by voice to start the van, unlock the van, and open the side door to extend my ramp. And at first I thought it was a little bit of a gimmick, but there have been so many times where I just want to be able to bring myself into the vehicle, or I'm waiting in the parking lot and overheating and want to turn the air conditioning on. So that has been a huge lifesaver.
Any closing thoughts on transit? Because I think when it's running smoothly, it's great. It works really well. But when it's not, it can be a real hassle for people that need those features and need, the wider gates and the elevators that often aren't working. Any thoughts on what can be done?
I think I think just more like education on disability issues. It's ongoing, right? It's an ongoing thing. It's not gonna stop anytime soon. I think just educating TransLink and educating just everybody about people's people's needs and what accessibility really is. Because it's more than just putting a ramp or putting an automatic door. It's like actually making things accessible for everybody.
So, Nicole, thank you for joining us. Thank you for the tips, sharing your experiences. Ian, you as well. It's great hearing the stories from around the world. And yeah, our peers will definitely appreciate the information.
Great, and as always, like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.